Hey there everybody, my name is Grant and you are watching the Weekly Comment, the show where I comment on something over the last week. Now, normally I would like to comment on some kind of news story, but instead this week I'm going to be commenting on a book that I listened to on Audible over the last week. In the latest episode of Cortex, they recommended a book called Triggered by Marshall Goldsmith and Mark Ryder. It's some kind of self-helpy, businessy type book, and I remember when listening to it, it first struck me as being very similar to Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit. And then he started referencing Charles Duhigg. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is just a derivative of that. If you're familiar with Duhigg's work, you know that he has this habit cycle. And part of the habit cycle is, the trigger. The trigger is some event, some stimuli that causes you to do a thing. Well, Duhigg's response to the trigger is simply replace the action you would normally do as a result of that trigger with something else. But in the book Triggered, he instead is advising you to, think about it rather than just replacing the trigger. Basically, he wants you to be conscious of what triggers you and then consciously take a different action. Now, when I was first listening to it, I had hoped that this book would be more about, how to spot a trigger, how to find the things that trigger you into doing certain actions that are not good for you. That would have been super helpful, but no, that's not what you're getting out of this book. Despite the fact that this book wasn't what I wanted it to be, I still got 4 things out of it. So here are the 4 things I learned from Triggered. So the first point he likes to emphasize is that we as humans are very good at planning stuff, but not very good at doing stuff. And listening through the book, I can attest to this. I have made, many plans. Many, yellow legal pads worth of plans over the years. And most of them fall through in most ways. And for his thesis, a big part of successfully, controlling or noticing your triggers is acknowledging the fact that you are good at making plans, but you suck at following through. So that's the first thing you should learn, and the first thing you need to accept is you suck at following through with your plans most of the time. Or the second thing I took from the book was his sort of cycle of change. He talks about how when trying to make a change in your life or in a system, there are 4 different steps you should go through. First is to create. Basically, this is a new habit or a new thing you should add to this system or your process. The second is preserve, which is something you're already doing or something that already exists that you want to keep on existing. Then comes eliminate, which is something that exists or that you do that you should stop doing or get rid of. And then the last piece is what he calls accept, as in accept something that cannot be changed and that you cannot get rid of. The third bit I took from this is sort of the difference between trying to change your environment versus changing how you react to your environment. And he goes on to say that you should try to the best of your ability, control the environment you're in, because your environment is often what triggers you into actions, good or bad. And so you should maximize the parts of your environment that cause you to do good things and minimize the parts that cause you to do not good things. And then, of course, with the things you cannot control, you need to find a way to mitigate those, which leads to number 4 that I took from this, which is using structures to minimize bad decisions. So thankfully in this book, he talks about the concept of, decision fatigue, where if you keep making decisions all day, that causes you to actually lose willpower and energy to do the things you need to do later. And with this, he notices that, most bad decisions people make are made later in the day when you don't have the willpower to make good decisions anymore. And so you should try to put in structures that mitigate the fallout from bad decisions or mitigate your inability to make good decisions later in the day. And one area that he suggests is checklists, of which he then references another productivity book that I've read before called the Checklist Manifesto. I would recommend reading that as well as The Power of Habit. And checklists are something I know I've been trying to incorporate more into my life over the last month or so, because it's just better to not have to think about all the things you need to do on a regular basis, rather than just having to come up with it on the spot. You know, just have it, have an app, have something that tells you, okay, you need to do this at this time, you know. Lists. That's basically the best mitigating thing you could do in your life if you have control of nothing else. So do I recommend you read Triggered? It's not the first choice I would give you. I would much more recommend that you read something like Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, or even Atul Gawande's Checklist Manifesto. So the two of them, I'd say, are much better to read than Triggered. But Triggered is only 6 hours, so, you know, if you have 6 hours worth of spare time of just, you know, mindless tasks that you can do while listening to something else, you can blow through it pretty quickly. That's it for this video. I would like to thank my generous patrons for their contributions that allow me to keep making these videos on a regular basis. If you don't want to miss any of the content that comes out from this channel, then I suggest you subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon, and follow me on social media so that way you don't miss when I put something up. Because you never know when YouTube's algorithm is going to decide, you don't want to see this. You don't need to see the thing you subscribe to that it's implied that you're supposed to see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.